Today, we're going to create 10 different monsters with the Glowforge using a variety of materials and techniques. Some of these techniques you might already know, others maybe not. Here's a quick preview. The first monster is probably the easiest one that we're going to create today. We're simply going to engrave our design and then color it in using these Posca paint markers. Now, this is a great technique, especially if you're just starting out. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 1/8 inch sheet of Baltic birch plywood and I'm going to place it in my Glowforge aura. Then we'll import our design, create an outline around the monster, and then hit print. So now that our monster has been engraved and cut, it's time to paint it using these Posca paint markers. Now these markers, they come in a variety of colors and thicknesses. But before I do that, I think I'm going to remove this char using a palm sander. And because we're using Baltic birch plywood without a finish, this is really simple. So I'm just going to turn my sander on. All right. So this looks a lot cleaner. I also might spritz it with some canned air just to make sure there's no dust left in the crevices. And now it's time to paint. I should also mention that I'm using Baltic birch plywood because Baltic birch plywood generally doesn't include a finish. You want your paint from your paint marker to be absorbed in the material. If your material has a finish on it, well, it's just going to lay on top and it can get scratched really easily. Next up is another wooden monster. This one's made using some plywood and a few different types of wood veneer. And essentially all we're doing is we're creating a collage. We're cutting out a lot of smaller pieces and we're adhering those pieces to the monster's body. Now, as you can see, I've already broken apart our file in Adobe Illustrator. For the body, I'm going to use a sheet of my small batch ply. I make a ton of this stuff and sell it online. And this is going to give the monster just a bit more character. This one was made in Paducah. This one, we're going to try a maple burrow. So let's go see how that's going to look. So now let's cut out our other shapes using these thin sheets of wood veneer. And here I'm using wenge, sapelli, zebra wood, and curly maple. But before we cut our shapes, I'm going to apply some 3M double-sided tape to one side of each veneer. This is going to help us assemble it in a very easy way later on. I'm also going to apply some paper masking to the other side of each veneer. And this is going to prevent soot from getting on our material. Instead, the soot is going to stay trapped on our paper masking. So let's prep our material now, and then we'll cut it. And then the last thing we need to do is simply put the pieces where they belong. So we're going to peel off the 3M tape, peel off the paper masking, and then place the shapes where they're supposed to go. As mentioned in my last materials video, acrylic is one of the most common materials to use with your Glowforge. And for this monster, we're going to create an inlay. Now the goal here is to get all of these smaller pieces to fit snugly into place. Now, I've already gone ahead and I cut out a backer for this monster, but now I need to cut out the body with places for all of these shapes to fit into. Check out my file to see how this is going to work. However, the trick here is how we're going to adhere all of the pieces onto our backer. So for this, I'm going to use this double-sided 3M tape, and I'm going to apply it to one side of this blue acrylic sheet. Simply peel off one side of our paper masking, and then apply the 3M tape onto our acrylic. Finally, let's cut out our shape with the 3M tape facing down. And when that's finished, we're going to peel off the 3M tape and then carefully place the body onto our backer. Okay, so now we're ready for the smaller pieces. And as you can see, they also have 3M tape applied to the back. However, there's a trick to getting everything to fit snugly into place. Now, when your laser is cutting out a shape, you lose a little bit of that material during the burning process. That's known as the kerf. And to compensate for that, I created an offset in Adobe Illustrator that makes each shape 0.08 inches larger. I then deleted the original shape, leaving the larger shape behind. And so this will account for the kerf, or the material lost during the process. So all we need to do now is to peel off our 3M tape and to fit each piece snugly into place. And while we're at it, let's engrave a photograph using these clear acrylic sheets. Now, the first thing that we need to do is we need to peel off the paper masking off of our acrylic. And then we're going to paint one side of our acrylic using this black chalk spray paint. And once that dries, we need to mirror and invert our image using Adobe Photoshop. And then we're going to place our painted acrylic piece into our Glowforge with the paint side facing up. And then in the Glowforge app, simply choose the Photo HD setting and engrave the photograph. Now, if you feel like your photograph needs more contrast after it engraves, you can simply just run the job again and you might get a better result. Now, our next monster is made out of leather, and it's really easy to work with leather using your Glowforge. Let's take a look at our file. And as you can see, we're using 4 different colors of leather to create this monster. So let's start by creating the stitching holes for the body. Now, in Adobe Illustrator, select the body shape, and then choose Object, scroll down to Path, and click on Offset Path. Type in -4 millimeters and click OK. Then, open up the stroke palette and make the stroke 1.3 millimeters. Give it rounded corners and make it a dashed line. Next, let's outline the stroke. Choose Object, scroll down to Path, and click on Outline Stroke. Finally, copy and paste our shape and reflect it so that we have a front and a back shape that we can stitch together. It's also important to mention that I needed to add some holes to the red stripes and the ears as well. Now that I have all my pieces, we're going to use this glue to start gluing up the body pieces. So we're just going to use this foam brush, put on a nice even coat, put everything together, but most importantly, let's make sure that our stitching holes are all lined up. When the glue dries, it's time to stitch the piece together. Now, this is more for aesthetics because frankly, the glue is going to hold everything together just fine. And to do this, we're going to need 2 needles, some waxed thread, and a stitching pony. So we're going to make a simple saddle stitch. We're going to start by threading our needles and stitching the 2 pieces together. Now, I have a full lesson on this in my Glowforge for Beginners course, but essentially, I'm just going to work through one hole and then the other until I'm all finished. And then finally, we'll attach the smaller pieces to our monster. Each smaller piece was cut with some 3M tape adhered to the back. So we just got to put everything together and it's all finished. So the felt monster is going to look a lot like the leather monster we just did, except this time we're going to use a combination of hot glue and 3M tape. And the reason we're using hot glue is that we don't want to use 3M tape on these horns. Well, because the backs are exposed and we don't want them to be sticky. Now, if you have a sewing machine, you could also sew the profile of the monster, which would look amazing, but I don't have a sewing machine in this shop. So let me put this together now, and then we're going to move on to the next monster. Just cut that one backwards. All right, I got to cut another one. Be right back. So I'm really excited to show this next technique as it's not as widely used. And so for this monster, we're going to create a layered stencil. And so to do this, you're going to need some ink pads, some brushes, some paper, and of course our stencil. Now I cut these thin Mylar sheets using my Glowforge Pro HD, but if you have a diode laser like the Spark or the Aura, vellum's a great alternative. It works just as well. So let's take a quick look at our file, and as you can see, I created a separate stencil for each color. Now to create our image, tape your first stencil to your paper. Then apply some ink to your brush, and then simply apply it. Do the same thing for each remaining stencil. Next up, let's mark metal. Now the Glowforge obviously can't cut metal. In order to do that, you need this huge fiber laser. So instead, if I need metal cut, I use a service called Send Cut Send. I send them a file, they cut my metal, and then they send it back. Now in order to mark the metal, we're not engraving it, but we're marking it black. I use a special marking spray. Now the first thing you need to do is you just need to spray your metal with this marking spray. Okay, so while that's drying, I'm going to create a jig so that I know precisely where to place my piece when I'm ready. And this is a bit more accurate than using the lid camera. Now, normally what I do is I tape a piece of paper to the Glowforge bed and I score an outline of my graphic onto the paper so that I can place it directly in that spot. But that's not going to show up very well on camera, so instead, I'm going to make this jig on a sheet of MDF. Now I can place my piece exactly on that spot and use the following settings to mark the metal. But this time, make sure you ignore the outline and only do the engraving. So when that's finished, we just need to wash off the marking spray. So when this dries, you might want to coat your metal with 2 coats of this Everbright spray. And what this is going to do, it's going to protect your metal and also increase the contrast of your mark. For this last example, we're going to use this Iron-On Eco Heat Transfer Vinyl Alternative to create a t-shirt with a monster on it. And for this, well, we're going to need these vinyl sheets. Let me take this out to show you what they look like. All right. We're going to need a t-shirt and a Cricut Easy Press. So let's start by uploading our graphic into the Glowforge app and mirroring it. Then we'll score the graphic and cut an outline around the whole thing. So when that's finished, I'm going to heat up my Cricut Easy Press to 330 degrees. And I'm going to start weeding out the parts that we don't want to transfer to the t-shirt. Okay, so now it's time to do the iron-on. So what we're going to do is take my Cricut Easy Press, put it over here. And then I'm going to use 1 sheet of butcher paper, like that. I'm going to take my t-shirt, place it on pad like that. Then I'm going to take my monster graphic. I want to make sure that the shiny side is on the top. And I'm going to take another sheet of butcher paper, and this is going to prevent the t-shirt from burning, hopefully. Put it on like that. And I'm going to apply pressure for, I don't know, about 15 seconds. We'll see how it is, and if it needs a little bit more time, we'll do it again. Now you can go one step further and create a multicolored t-shirt by cutting out all of the different shapes and then transferring them to this Cricut transfer paper. Now in order to adhere this to a t-shirt, well, the process is the same. Now, I hope you found this helpful, and if you have any interesting techniques that you use on a regular basis, feel free to post them in the comments below. I'd love to hear about them. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one.